So this is a continuation to my previous lecture of concrete as building material, and we are studying the strength aspect, and now we will be seeing the factors affecting compressive strength because of aggregates. So aggregates, again, they form a very integral part of the concrete. As you know that concrete is made up of cement, sand, aggregate and water. Cracking load or the failure of concrete is basically dependent on, or largely it is dependent on aggregates. Now why and how it is dependent on aggregates? You need to understand that in concrete, as I told you, that it is made up of cement, sand, aggregates and water. Everything has to work as a single unit or as a team. Okay, even if one of the team members falter, then the entire concrete fails, or it goes into the direction of failing. So for that to happen, even when these aggregates are, you can consider it as a team member of the concrete, and if it is going to falter in some direction, then the concrete will fail. So what are those properties of aggregates which we need to understand so that it does not cause any problem or cause any trouble to the compressive strength? First is the shape of the aggregate. Now how is this related to the compressive strength? So first is smooth aggregates we have, and then we have rough aggregates. Now what are the properties of the smooth aggregates? Smooth aggregates do not have a good mechanical bonding because they are smooth and they cannot interlock with each other. That is the reason they can slide. Basically, you have seen pebbles, so it's sort of that way. Due to this, it is easier for the aggregates to slide over each other during the load dissipation. So therefore, when the load is dissipating, or if we have a concrete the aggregates like this, so when the load is dissipating on this, the load has to travel through the cement paste, the aggregate and everything, and only then the structure can sustain it. So when this load is traveling through the aggregate, if the aggregate is smooth, then what will happen? It will slide over each other, and that is going to cause some displacement inside, and that will lead to the failure of the concrete. So the smooth aggregates can cause cracking even at the lower stresses. Your concrete as a whole, you had designed it theoretically to take a stress much higher, but because of the smooth aggregates sliding over each other, that can cause cracking even at the lower stresses. When we come to the rough aggregates have the advantage of interlocking. So these are like the rough aggregates. So they can basically stay intact even when the load is coming. So this allows more load to be dissipated across the cross section. Therefore the rough aggregates cause cracking at higher stress as compared to the smooth aggregates. So first property that we saw for aggregates was the shape of the aggregates, how it influences the compressive strength. Next is the size of the aggregate. Now a normal person would think that larger the aggregate, better will be the strength taking ability of this. So like if we use very large aggregates into our concrete, it is like very intuitive to think that the large aggregates would take more loads, but in reality it's not like that. So it was thought that since the large aggregate will have lesser surface area as compared to small aggregates, because when the aggregates get divided into finer or smaller aggregates, then each will have its own surface area. Therefore the surface area is increased, right? But in the larger aggregate, the surface area would be less, and therefore the water that it absorbs, that will be less. So if it absorbs less water from the cement, when you are making a concrete, you add water to it, you add cement. Now this water that you added, that was not meant for the aggregate, that was meant for the cement. This water is required for the hydration process of the cement. So if this water is not enough for the hydration process, your cement will not gain strength. So what it was thought is that larger aggregates will absorb less water, and hence more water would be available for the cement for that hydration purpose, and because of that it will gain strength. But in actual, larger maximum size aggregates give lower surface area for development of gel bonds. Now, as true as it is that it will absorb less water, but it is also true that because of this less surface area as compared to smaller aggregates, this cement water, when they form a paste, this paste has to bond with this aggregate. So if this paste is not bonding correctly with the aggregate, then the whole idea of having the aggregate into the concrete becomes void, right? Because aggregate has to work integrally with the cement paste, and for that to happen, the aggregate has to bond correctly with the cement paste. Bigger aggregate size also cause a more heterogeneity in the concrete, which will prevent the uniform distribution of load when stressed. So what it means is, just a minute. Yeah, see, as compared to this, you can see how homogeneous this mixture looks like. So obviously in this diagram it is exaggerated, and actually not this much big aggregates are not used, but it's just exaggerated to show that it won't be a homogeneous mixture if the bigger size aggregates are used. When large size aggregate is used, due to internal bleeding, the transition zone will become much weaker due to the development of micro cracks, which result in lower compressive strength. So what actually happens is, when we use large aggregates, first of all we have the paste phase, that is this is the cement paste. Second, we have the aggregate phase, and the third we have is a transition phase. Now you might have studied what a transition phase is, but what actually happens is that there is a small phase around the aggregate which is formed, and it is mainly because of the absorption of water, because this aggregate tries to absorb water. Therefore, at the boundary of the aggregate there is more water, and as you move away from it, the water decreases. So if I have to draw a graph of water content, let's say that this is the I've zoomed it further, okay, and let us say that this is the boundary of aggregate, and I am trying to draw a graph. I will use a different pen. Okay, this is the boundary of aggregate, and let's say this is a graph which is having the water content. Basically, I will write it as water content. So at the boundary, the water content is very high, and as you move away from the boundary, it goes lower and lower till it reaches the water cement ratio water content. So at this point the water content is very high, and because the water content is very high near the boundary, the cement content is low, and because of this the strength is low, and as you move away, because it reaches its actual water cement ratio, the strength is quite okay as you move away. So this zone is called as the transition zone. So let me just erase this. So at transition zone there is a water cement ratio gradient, the graph that I showed you, that is called as a gradient graph. Gradient created with more water content at the boundary of aggregate and less cement content, making a weak zone. So at the boundary of aggregate it is a weak zone. This weak zone causes micro cracks, and concrete is more probable to fail at this junction. So this is more happens in the large aggregates, when we are using large aggregates, as compared to the smaller aggregates. Generally, high strength concrete or rich concrete is adversely affected by the use of large size aggregates, but in lean mixes or weaker concrete, the influence or size of the aggregate gets reduced. It is interesting to note that in lean mixes, larger aggregates give highest strength, while in rich mixes, it is smaller aggregates which yield higher strength. So, what is a lean mix and what is a rich mix? When we talk about mix rich and lean, we are basically talking about the cement content. So, in lean mixes, we have lesser cement content. In rich mixes, we have more cement content. So what it is saying is that in lean mixes, if you use bigger size aggregate, that aggregate will take more load and it will give you a good strength as compared to a smaller aggregates. But in rich mixes, the smaller size aggregate give good strength, and that is why even in the high performance concretes and in the self compacting concretes, we do not use large aggregates, we use very small aggregates. Now, concrete under various stresses. First is the tension. So we have studied how a tension force acts, and it acts in this way. If this is a concrete body, then it is going to act this way. The theoretical tension strength can be calculated by considering the molecular cohesion. However, this is calculated assuming the solid is without any flaws and perfectly homogeneous. So if you're I'll talk more about what flaws actually mean. Thus the actual tension strength is much lower than the theoretical one. We will understand these two statements. Just let me complete this. Griffith stated that flaws lead to high stress concentration. So now we are talking about flaws since these 2 points, but what are those flaws exactly? So let us just get into this concrete and understand what flaws are in actual case. Let me zoom this thing. So I have taken a very small part and I've zoomed it, and what you see here is you have these small cracks. So let us understand these flaws one by one. First flaw is the poor bonded transition zone. So I already explained you what a transition zone is, and it is basically the zone of weakness around the boundary of the aggregate. This is the first flaw. Okay. Second is micropores or voids. So the body of concrete cannot be without these air voids, or it will be either voids filled with water or it would be voids filled with air, but there would be voids in the concrete. So this is the second flaw which is there. Third flaw is micro cracks. Now these are very small cracks that are formed inside the body of the concrete, even just after pouring it, and when it starts to set, at that time itself it is formed even without putting any load over it. So these micro cracks are formed inside the body. This is the third flaw, and there would be more flaws also. These flaws are the weak sections in the concrete and the stress is concentrated around them. So what the first point actually says is that there is a theoretical tension strength which can be calculated, and that is considering the molecular cohesion. So between every molecule we have some cohesive force. So if we consider that cohesive force between two molecules, the strength that we will be getting is the theoretical tension strength. But this force that we are calculating, it will not consider any flaw inside the concrete. But in actual concrete we do have flaws, and therefore the second point states that the actual tension strength will be much lower than the theoretical tension strength, because our actual body of concrete has these flaws into it, right? And this statement that these flaws are the weak sections in the concrete and stress is concentrated around them, this is a very important statement even in consideration of our nature, because it is the law of nature that it always finds the weaker path to move around. If you know how a lightning strikes the earth, it will always choose that path through the air which offers it the least resistance. So these flaws are those paths for this load. When this load is applied because of this tension load, what the stresses would be, what tensile stresses, right? So these tensile stresses which are set up in the body of the concrete, the easiest path for these tensile stresses to go around is through these flaws, and therefore these tensile stresses get concentrated around these flaws. It's the law of the nature to go through the weakest path. For example, again I will show you that, let's say you have to move from point A to point B. One path is like this, the other path is like this. Naturally, to have the least effort to do, you will move from this point to this point in the least way. Again, this principle is used in many cases. Even in the structural analysis it is used, the principle of least strain energy or the minimum work principle. So it is used in many cases. Same way it is used in this ideology as well. The flaws vary in size and only the largest ones cause failures. So these flaws are of different sizes and only the flaw which is of greater size is going to cause the failure. Second stress is the compression stress. So this is the stress in which the concrete excels. Compression test is done using compression testing machine. We have all seen how a compression testing machine looks like. Griffith's flaw theory is for tensile stresses, but it can be extended to fracture under bi and triaxial stress and also under uniaxial compression. So this case that you are seeing is a uniaxial compression. A biaxial compression would look something like this, that is acting in the two axis, and a triaxial, if it is acting in the third axis, then it would be called as a triaxial or a multi-axial stress, which we will be studying later on. Even when two principal stresses are compressive, the stress along the edge of the flaw is tensile at some points so that fracture can take place. What this point says is that if you are testing your cube and the principal stresses are like this, the failure that will happen would be something like this. Okay, it will fail along a diagonal, and along this diagonal there would be tensile stresses set up, because only then it can fail, right? If the tensile stresses don't set up in this diagonal, then how it is going to get apart from each other? So the tensile stresses have to set up for the fracture to take place. Failure in compression can sometimes also be governed by Poisson's ratio, where due to lateral expansion, cracks propagate in a direction perpendicular to the application of load. So mu is tensile stress at cracking in flexure upon compressive stress at cracking in flexure. What will happen in this, since we are trying to load it like this, there will be shortening of the length. The length will get shortened, right? But the width, it will get expanded. So in the width we are experiencing tensile stresses, because what is happening? This is getting expanded, right? Isn't this tension? This action is tension. So in the width we are experiencing tensile stresses. Along the length we are experiencing compressive stresses, and that is what this Poisson's ratio is saying. Tensile stresses at cracking, that is lateral strain upon longitudinal strain. This is what you have studied for Poisson's ratio, right? And Young's modulus is stress upon strain. So strain is nothing but stress by Young's modulus. So this I can also write as tensile stress upon Young's modulus divided by compressive stress upon Young's modulus. This Young's modulus will get cancelled. So what I can say is Poisson's ratio is equal to tensile stress at cracking upon compressive stress at cracking. The The third one is multi-axial stress. That is when the stress is acting in all the direction. In a triaxial compression, it is seen that the failure mechanism of concrete changes from brittle to ductile. This is what I have shown you of this view, a view from this side. So this are the two compressive stresses in the two axes, and this point that you are seeing here, it is in the third axis, that is in the plane perpendicular to your screen basically. In triaxial compression, the increase in lateral compression considerably increases the axial force that can be taken by the concrete. So when the stress is acting from all three directions, it is seen that the actual load that can be taken by a member, if it was only being acted like this, okay, a single uniaxial compression, let's say that you will get some compression or compressive value of around 25 megapascals, okay, when a uniaxial compression is acting. But when the triaxial compression is acting, that same axial force you might get to around 50 or around 60 megapascals. So there is a huge increase in that axial load. This is just an example. It might not be that much increase also, but I'm saying that because of the lateral stresses, it does increase. Here is a graph which is showing the influence of high lateral stress on the axial stress at failure. So it is showing that a lateral stress of 50 megapascals is giving you an axial stress of around 220 or 230 megapascals. So if these lateral stresses, or I would say these stresses are around 50 megapascal, then the axial load that can be taken by the concrete would be around 230 to 220 megapascal. So you can see that it is increasing your compressive stress, and same way if you increase your lateral stress, again more compressive stress can be taken. Obviously it will also depend on what grade that concrete was designed for. If it was designed for a lesser grade, it will not increase the strength much, and if the lateral stresses are tensile in nature, then it is going to have an opposite effect. So if these lateral stresses are tensile in nature, the compressive force will decrease in opposed to how it was increasing, it will decrease if the lateral stresses are tensile in nature. So the graph would be something different for that. So that's it for today's lecture. In the next lecture we will be continuing more with this topic. Till then, take care. Thank you.